Oh, do you admit this this way? Yeah, that way. Do 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 do. Oop, too far. Just a little. There we go. All right. Welcome to evidence. We're about 3 minutes out. And now to remember what we're talking about today, because I don't remember. Let's see. We just finished up eyewitnesses. And next, that. We're going to talk about computer stuff, dog searches. That's funny because I was actually just talking about dog searches. Let's see here. Evidence. And I think I've, except for today, of course, got the class videos all caught up across all my classes. Nope, I tell a lie. I hadn't hyperlinked that one for this class. So I'll get those hyperlinked out there. Um, Sorry about that. I thought I had all of them caught up in this class too. And you put in last week's or Monday's. All right. So we are down. We're down here. Special needs searches. We talked about roadblocks, jails and prisons, evidence in foreign countries. We talked about that. Let's see. While we're waiting, things going on in the world, feel free to sound off. Um, Trying to think of what's going on in the world, but to be honest with you, yeah, patient evidence, physical evidence, so 14 and 15 today. That's what we'll get through. We'll probably get through both 14 and 15. And then we'll go back into uh, 12 after those because I want to talk about computers. I like computers, but we'll also get into dogs and physical evidence. And so here's where we'll talk about the different types of evidence, I'm sure. So this is criminal evidence. That's going to be 14, 13, 14, and 15. So we finished 13. Where is, I guess I haven't downloaded those yet. 1 second, I'll do that, and then we'll get rolling. $13. Download. Nope, we already did 13. Yep, I clicked the wrong button. 14. All right, it is officially 1 o'clock. All right. I don't know if I want to use the PowerPoint on this one or not. I might end up going in the PowerPoint after we go through the stuff up we for what is chapter 14, see if there's anything in there that we miss. I don't think there will be. Let me move these around because I can't see you all just yet. Hold on 1 second. Okay. We probably are taking them trick or treating. We haven't actually gotten them outfits yet. We need to do that. That'll be what we do whenever I get out of here today. Yay! Um, it's one of those things that oh, rough month. I'd say that most times aren't rough, but good God, like whenever you start talking about life a little bit, it's always interesting to me because you know kind of contrast where most students are sitting. It's like I remember sitting in those seats, being your guys' age, and thinking how hard life was back then. And it's like it's been decades since then. I've been working real hard, advanced myself in a considerable number of ways, and I still run into those same difficulties in some ways. And I stop and I think, if I'm running into those kinds of difficulties, what kind of stuff are you guys going through? My God, life is difficult right now. Hopefully, you guys aren't struggling with anything. If you are, you need help with anything, let me know because, like I said, life can be rough. That's one of those harder lessons, I guess, that we have to always keep in mind and I guess learn repeatedly throughout life. I don't know why, but that's just, I guess, part of life, the difficulties. But today we're gonna be talking about fun stuff. And so we're moving into um well, that would be it says your physical evidence and that kind of thing. So there's a few things I want to talk about, and then I see it starts out with Terry versus Ohio. And so we'll talk about Terry, and then I'll talk about evidence types and that kind of stuff if it doesn't have that in here, because you'll want to know that. So Terry versus Ohio. If you have any police officers, policing background, police officers in your family, you know that one, Terry stuff. You've heard that before. Even if you don't, within the classes, you've heard that phrase before. If it doesn't immediately bring to mind what that exact case covered, it's the one that started the precedent for stop and frisk. And stop and frisk is itself sometimes a heated subject. To know because I move around a lot and I want to be able to still make eye contact with you all. Just a little bit. Too much. Rah. So sensitive at times, not sensitive. And so this case is really, really important because it signals where that initial threshold is where you can intervene. Because once you're in one of these types of positions or anything like that, you have to intervene. You need to know where that line is. Exactly. Because if you cross it, just like what we were talking about the exclusionary rule, you cross that line, there's no going back. I mean, anything that you had built on your way there very well might just have been a wasted effort, right? At best. And that's at best. That's not the, miracle situation where we find some other way to still see the good done that needs to be done. This is where that line is. Because if you violate this, you just make your life a lot more difficult. So Terry versus Ohio. The case itself, if you are familiar with it, great. If not, it was in Ohio. No, I'm just kidding. It wasn't Ohio. I'm not kidding about that. But, the case, what it was about, I believe it was 3 juveniles. Essentially, what they were doing was looking at a business, sizing it up to rob the place, burglarize it at minimum. And so police officers on foot, if I remember correctly, saw these juveniles moving around, acting and peeking in the windows. They look like they're scoping the place out to at least burglarize it. And as soon as they were done doing that, they hightailed it a few streets over. So the officer over and met up with them. And as he met up with them, he could see that they were making plans. When they saw that there was, if I remember correctly, chase that ensued. Officer, no, actually, I take back. Can't remember how to chase now. Now that I've said that. Basically, what happens there, though, is that initial threshold for you stay right there, and I'm going to pat you down. He turned up a gun. Yeah, so of course, that's like, if you look at that, those behaviors, what they're doing, the fact that you have a weapon that they have no reason to possess, you've got everything there to validate the impression that you had that they were going to do something criminal, right? At that point in time, what you're talking about is that reasonable suspicion. So there's that word again, reasonable. Remember, probable cause is further down the line. That probable cause means you're over 50%. Well, this is on the road there. That means you have some reasons to suspect somebody. That the average person would look at those reasons and come to the same conclusion. And Yeah, most people are gonna look at that. You see, three people looking at peering in buildings. They look like they're together, they're sizing things up. They retreat, they rally up, they start formulating plans in upon sight. Maybe they flee or you see something like that. It's like, yeah, you got everything you need right there for have some suspicions for stuff going on there. You get to inquire, and from there on out. When you really get into it, we'll talk about incident to an arrest here in a second, a little bit more. When you really, really, really get into it, that's just for the stop, right? You have a reason to stop them. They are no longer free to leave. That's what that means. That's where that initial earliest threshold is. Hey, so that's where that earliest threshold is for making that stop. Everybody's online. Everybody stopped coming in person. It's nice to see someone who's actually alive again. You know, it's fun. I'm gonna go off into rant for a second a little bit because I just we got a little bit of time and I feel like talking a little bit. One of the things that I like about like this format of class is it hits the different formats. Like you got the in-person, you have the synchronous online, and then I also set up where you can do asynchronous. One of the things that I like people to think, and usually I can't remember if I had it at the beginning of my semester. It's a lesson I try to have at the beginning of each year, many, about the relationship between education and careers. The common element there is work, but really the real thing, if you ever and you guys have probably already experienced this with jobs that you had, where it's like the real thing that most people are ever really looking for is a warm body, right? And then from there, it's the training element. Maybe they train you, or maybe they just warm body kind of thing. It's like we want warm seats here. I like warm seats. Thank you for being here. Anytime you guys can come in, feel free to. I like that. I like that a lot because that's one of those things that's it's a behavioral thing that I won't say routine or stability because it's not out of those things. It's one of those things that's I don't want to say a doorway either. It's not really a doorway. It kind of is a doorway though. That's that first element that they'll be looking at for careers. So the better practice you get at that, the better off you are, I think. But here we've got some wiggle room. So you need to use it. But if you can't be here, be here. The frisk itself. You were in procedures last semester, yes?
I was in procedures, I don't think the last semester.
Was it 2 semesters ago then?
Probably.
Good God. You just said you move fast. Do you remember what the threshold for when you can conduct or the purpose of a frisk? Yeah, yeah. Specifically officer protection, right? So that's only what they're really looking for. It's literally, you're really just looking there for weapons. And it's just to dispel that suspicion that there might be that danger there. And you have a suspicion that something criminal's going on. This thing's different, right? The stop itself doesn't justify the frisk. If you just frisk someone every time you stop them, is that really a frisk or are you doing something else? And then the threshold for identifying, okay, that's a frisk, that's a search, right? You know, that kind of a thing. When can you go after something in someone's pocket? It's totality of the circumstances, that kind of thing. But that's one where that frisk can expand, but it has to fall under that. I don't want to say immediately apparent, but basically that's what you get for it. It's there's enough indication for whatever it is that they felt that they'd cross that threshold for probable cause, right? When I rub, someone's waistline's like that big lump is a handle, that's probably a gun or a knife or something like that. You go after and get it. And as I'm patting someone down, that in your pocket, that's a glass crack pipe. It's like I know exactly what that is. I'm gonna take that out of you, or a little ball of hair, or whatever. And it's like, yeah, could be a piece of lint, but more than likely it's not. And so I'm gonna go after it. And so that's the stare, the ferry, the stop element, the frisk element. From there, we move into the it says incident to a lawful arrest, and that's kind of what I was getting into. I know I mentioned that before, So anytime that you arrest someone, standard procedure is you search them. You want to, because you want to know what's on them, right? Could it be something that you know, they could have drugs on them, they could have weapons, they could have any number of things. And some of that stuff's pretty, you'd be surprised how concealable some of that stuff is. I used to have a friend who had an uncle who was a police officer. Like every now and then they'd take the car to get detailed and cleaned and all that. And every now and then you'd be like, hey, guess what we found stuffed in between the seats of the cushion of your back seat? What do you like? Oh, this one's cocaine. It's like, yeah, it's just in there. I wonder where that came from. Well, it's got to be between now and the last time that car detailed, right? But that's a whole long list of people. So nothing you can do about it, right? Or even better, it's like what was it, the tiny inconspicuous handcuff key? Has ever heard of those? Inconspicuous handcuff key. It's literally what it's called. It's like this big. See that space in my finger? That big. What it is it's a little piece of plastic that has the bell, or not bell, but the key end of the bell cut off for handcuff key. And instead of it having the bell that you normally attach, when I say bell, what I mean is the little loop thing, because it has that, it's a little, and then whatever. So to get rid of that, because that's the part that makes it, I guess, more obvious what's in something. And instead of that, they've got a little piece of plastic. It's a little plastic thing. It's got a little hook on it. You hook it on somewhere, and it's such a small little piece of plastic. It's not much bigger than the end of that cap right there. And guess what? Stick right here. It's on the inside of my belt loop, or hooked into the edge of one of my pockets or my pants or shirt or inside. And so next thing you know, boom, hey, look, no more handcuffs. That's dangerous, right? Why is the stop and frisk so controversial? That's a hell of a question. There are multiple reasons why. Probably two big reasons. The biggest one is application. How it's applied. It's one of the really interesting things. Usually when it comes to complaints, if you look at police officer, like complaints against police officers, it's usually not always, usually a complaint about how something was done, not that something was done. Meaning, officer had justification for taking the action. It's just that action was one, probably not a good thing, or two, when it was done, it was performed in such a way that that person, you know, they're being an asshole, right? Is essentially what you get to. That'd be like this for use of force. If I yell at you loud enough, you rupture your eardrum. Is that force? I don't know. If in the process of putting you back into the back of a police officer's vehicle, I fracture one of the bones in your wrist, because there's a lot of little bones in there. I've got you by your wrist by cuffs. It's pretty easy to do. Is that too much force or is that reasonable? That's a hard thing to tell. Right? Person's putting up force, they're resisting me. You have them in the right position, you can dislocate a shoulder without much effort at all. That's a shoulder, that's a big joint. That's not a small one or a small bone. Yeah, so they moved into harassment is what it was. I'll talk about that in a second. And so what happened there is big cities. And so you've got that, about this in one of my earlier classes, that there's that under and over. So if you're dealing with enforcement, you have under and over enforced kind of thing. Like if you're over enforcing stuff, typically that's policing will get into broken windows kind of thing. You over enforce things to show that there's no threshold here for whatever issue you're dealing with, right? So when people line up and conform better, ideally, they are deterred from their criminal behavior. That doesn't always work because people still want to engage in criminal behavior. So there's always going to be someone who wants to. You under enforce it. That's what they tried. in a number of places in the last decade or so, right? We're not going to charge people with these types of crimes. What happens? Those crimes skyrocket. You get large, not should say large, but significant numbers of people who now know that it doesn't matter what I do related to this. They're not going to crack down on this at all. I think I want to get something for free or whatever. Or I think I'm going to go do that. Drug use. Okay, well, I'm going to be a lot more cavalier with it. I don't really care now. And then you'll have more people who overdose, right? And so there's a careful balance there. What they did with this thing was not that. New York was the exemplar, if you will. Basically, if you trying to remember the name of it, they've got a really good documentary, pretty short. It's less than an hour. Hunted by, I can't remember the name. I'll have to look it up. But it's a person who lived in New York. What they did is, yeah, I'm going to turn on the audio and let people just hear what's happening. Not even see, just hear, right? And then just hearing it, you hear how he's being handled and what they're saying to him. That kind of shit. It's like, oh yeah, that needs to be put to stop immediately, right? Because it's one, it's racially charged. Two, it's harassment. Three, it's dangers of physical violence. Four, what they were doing that was really, really bad is they were using the stop and frisk as basically a political tool. Right? We're going to keep our streets safe. And to do so, we're going to go and make sure that we frisk some people. And if you're going to be frisking people without real justification, but making sure that you're frisking people to make sure that, you know, they've had the proper amount of notice that they're going to be frisked. Yeah, where are you going to go? Going to minority areas. Why? There's already a lot of complaints there already. So we already ignore a lot of those complaints. Why don't we just add some more complaints that no one cares, right? Because they didn't care in the first place. People do care, and yeah, that's massively wrong. And so that one went up. Good God. I wish I could remember the name of the case. The New York Police Department, yeah, massively discriminatory in its practices, massively. If you look at the rates and the areas that they were targeting, if you got your stop and frisks, great, you continue your job. They wouldn't mess with you. If you did not get them, they'd start transferring you into areas that were more and more minority until you made sure you got those frisks. Ooh, that's really messed up. That is why the second thing is why it was controversial. It came up in the last that's not the last presidential election, it was the one before, 2016. Both candidates were speaking on the topic and both of them were wrong. It's fun because one of them said it's perfectly fine and perfectly, viable. On the other side, you got one saying it's unconstitutional. It's like, well, it's both. As long as you're doing it correctly, it can be perfectly legal. If you're doing it like what they did in New York, do not pass go. You should go directly to jail yourself. It's like that kind of thing. That's what you're dealing with. And so it's funny because that one for me was one. It's really, really interesting because I had two parties on either side. Both were wrong. Neither one of them were really going to look at what's going on in the middle. And it's like, good golly, has that issue gotten any better? No, that's the one that's still going on in society now. So that's the issue with the stop and frisk. As soon as you have dispelled that suspicion, the stop ends. As soon as you no longer are concerned with protection, and you had a reason to be concerned with the first place, that frisk should be done. And it should be very brief. That's why it's allowed. It's not a full search. However, if something develops, you get probable cause, you can move into searches incident to an arrest, and then it moves into inventory searches. I talked about that a little bit before. When we start talking about those types of things, there's a number of justifications for them. Keep in mind, if you're arresting someone, you get to search them because that's, you are taking them into your possession, whatever in their possession and now yours. You know this. Inventory searches are much the same way. So it's like they had a backpack on them or a car. They were in a car and you're taking the car. They'll do the same kinds of processes where they'll do an inventory to see what it is, what's in it, all those types of things. As they're doing that, there's a few things at play, but what I'll talk about is few things at play. Time element. You talk about the there's something on here. The different justifications for inventory searches. All right, so you have that whatever someone's carrying with them. First off, you want to make sure you have a department policy on it. If you don't have a department policy on inventory searches, what you should be doing to handle those, you don't get to do them. Right? There's no standard there. And so that's a huge issue. That's one where there's no policy plus issues. You've got lawsuits against the department itself, maybe the municipality, that kind of thing. From there, purposes. They serve identification. Let's see. Protection from dangerous things, right? They could have all kinds of things, explosives, that kind of stuff. Let's see here. That would be to something along the lines of ensuring the return of said items. And probably the big one. False claims. You start looking at those who say, yeah, I had money, right? Ooh, that's a fun. I'll come back to that one in a second. False claims. Is there anything else I want to say here? Inventory searches, property lock is here. Okay. So before it moves in searches in the warrant plan. This thing really funny. False claims. Do things ever disappear? Well, these inventory things, one of them is to protect against false claims of lost or stolen goods. Does it still happen anyway? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Where my mind went on this one. You ever heard Afro Man? Yeah. So he had he redone a song a year back, something like that. And in it, you started recounting some of the issues that happened to him at the hands of government. It's like they raided this house, they cut off all of his internal cameras and that kind of thing. And then he had how much money just disappear out of the safe. And it's like, yeah. And so it's like, yeah, that stuff happens.
They did really good without a time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And so that's what does happen. Okay. And so I'll get you through that first part. Obtaining physical evidence from the person. Okay. So now. So the warrant requirement. As a general rule, warrants are required for everything, from searches, seizures, everything. However, we do not require them across the board. And so that's one of those things that's really interesting to begin with, because if you see, it's like as a base rule, kind of treat the exception more as the base rule than the actual base rule. Right? There are reasons for that. Primarily, it's timing. As these things develop, usually they're pretty short order and time development. It really picked up with the advent of the automobile. So that's where your exceptions to the warrant requirement really kick in and start to get automobile. Because basically by the time you go and get a warrant, how many counties away can they be gone? It's gonna take some time to process that paperwork. If they're running, yeah, going 50 miles an hour. What are they? 3 counties over? Easy. It's like out of the state. Assertions that can be justified during an investigation, investigative detention. We talked about that when we were talking about Terry stops, incident to a lawful arrest. We've already talked about that. Scope and extent, incidents to an arrest. As I said, the most conservative, like the most, I want to say withdrawn. Anything, right? Anything within one's reach, because that's going to be you have access to it. And so, like, if I'm right here, I get arrested and I've got like over here or something like that, I get arrested. That came with me. Yeah, we're probably going to do that too. Right? Is it within reach? Yeah. What were the grounds in which I was seized? Did I get out of sight at any point in time? So that means the likelihood of search a wider area increases. How wide? Well, no. It varies. It can be just the wingspan. It could be like, okay, if I'm being chased down around this hall, I came around through this door, I ducked over here. You only lost sight of me after I came in the room, so you know this side of the room's clean. Check this side. There'd be no real reason to go look over there unless you had, I follow. Would you start moving everything? Probably not, unless you think that there's something extra wrong. The limits that it has gone historically, much farther. Things that have historically passed that would not today. There was an search incident to arrest that included an entire house. Person split off into their house. Yeah, that's not the same thing as an incident to arrest, search incident to arrest. That's one you need a warrant, that kind of thing. Let's see here. Evidence obtained during investigative searches. Probable cause, an objective or subjective standard. That's always a good question for people. We got time about not quite 20 minutes. All right, so we'll do this. It itself is an objective measure. Probable cause just means that it is more than likely that criminal activities take place. You have a cause for your actions that is more than likely to actually exist, right? It doesn't, that's the standard. That is an objective standard. However, the subjective side of it is what exact elements do you use to establish it, right? How is it you can build things together to say, yes, I have it at this level or not? And so those things build up differently, depending on what it is you're specifically dealing with. It's like if you're dealing with justifications for a stop or an arrest kind of things. As you start looking at really both of those, you'll see that one is the totality of the circumstances, and two, certain actions have significant weight, right? Immediate flight being one of those. If I see an officer and I take off running the other direction, that's a pretty strong indicator that I'm running from the officer. Could be running to something, but it just depends. Do I have any other reason to suspect you? And then again, we're in a high crime area and I do that, then that's enough, right? And so it's kind of interesting. Okay. Private premises. Yeah, generally you'll want a warrant or a search or arrest warrant. You need to believe the person's in there. When it comes to like an arrest warrant, something of that nature, typically you don't go in after the person. You hang out and wait. They're gonna come out at some point in time. You can just sit there and wait. You don't need to go up in somebody's house. One, that's dangerous for all partners. And so that's easier to fit that way. Searches, they'll typically have a time frame attached to those. Let's see. Here's where it talks about knock and announce a little bit. That section. Did I mention, have I talked about knock and announce in here before? Okay. I can remember how to. Basically, when you start getting into knock and announce, it is a requirement when you start looking at so that warrant, what it represents, and all it really represents, is that means that probable cause has been established. Right? That's what a warrant does. That's basically all it does. Yes, it does a lot more than that. Of course, like if it's a search warrant, it's going to list the place to be searched, things that you're looking for, all of that stuff. But all it functionally does is establish probable cause before you go and take action. So if you think about it, what this does is it's sort of like an added protection to make sure that your evidence, your stuff like that gets in. You have the time to do it, you should. If you have the time to do it, do you have to do it? Not necessarily. You fall into those exceptions. So, I think that works fine. Whenever you conduct a search, that is a special type of warrant. No knock. The justification for having a no knock warrant typically includes some type of danger, like as in physical danger, destruction of evidence. Yeah, this person, you're going to start hearing flushing as soon as you knock, or if you knock, you're going to find an open window, right? Something like that. Or they're going to turn and attack. And so they'll come in without an announcement, faster and hotter. It's like, yeah. And so that's really dangerous. That one's always, I really like looking at that from the perspective of our justification here is the danger associated with the large ones.
They usually do it when people sleep, though, right?
Yes, they catch everybody completely by surprise. And if you're going to do that, does that add to the danger or reduce it? I honestly don't know.
I think it would reduce it, though.
Yeah, it depends because it really depends on what you're walking into. Most people, if you catch them in that kind of a situation, what will you see? Usually, like people will freeze because it's unexpected. You picked the wrong person, though. That person, yeah, you're gonna have one of those things where it's like, what was it, Breonna Taylor? Yeah. What happened there? What was that? Was that a raid? Oh, God, it's been so long since that was raid. I remember she wasn't the target; he was. Did nighttime someone pounded on the door? How are people gonna react? Right? You open that door, or let's say you don't even get the door open, and someone's beating on your door, or you heard something out there, and you got a gun in your hand. What's the likelihood you're going to have a bullet in you? Very, very. In fact, it's like I can remember one time where I can hear. I heard a story where some stuff like that happened. It was swatting. This is a different kind of thing where someone's using this whole process as a weapon to try to kill somebody. Guy got swatted at like 4 a.m. Apparently, neighbor or enemy or something like that. Called the police, told them that they were that person, said that they were going to plant an explosive at some type of school and all this stuff. And so literally in the course of just a few minutes, you have that whole area mobilized and kicking in at that guy's door. It's 4 a.m. If I remember correctly, it wasn't the most, it was a fairly rural urban area. It wasn't the most large number of people around. He's used to carrying around a gun and that kind of thing. Someone's speaking on the door, he pulls out his gun and he opened fire. Shot the police chief in the chest. He's wearing a vest. Stopped. The police chief lived. I went through the police chief's arm and into his vest. Yeah, he was gunned up, ready to go. As soon as he realized that was a police officer, of course, he dropped the gun. Oh, you know, he lived. Usually, what happens is if you get something like that, the gun goes off back right at you. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know how that happened. That guy must have had something sit on his shoulder. It's just like, that's incredible. And of course, it was the best part of it was all false. But the original reporting was that the guy had explosives there. But he was a target shooter or something like that. Did his own reloading and had propellant for gunpowder. And so it's like, yeah, no, not explosives at all false framing to justify the actions. There's not social turmoil or anything like that. Unbelievable, though, the guy lived. I couldn't believe that. That never happens. Especially to get a shot because everyone's reaction right then is just okay. Yeah. It's like you're playing Doom all of a sudden. Everybody's just going off. Not really, but it feels like that sometimes, I guess. Everybody firing, not going to announce and wait. Okay. So while we're talking about that no, that's an exceptional situation. You've got some reason to justify. There have been instances where there have been attempts to create blanket exceptions to this rule for things like what was it? Was it violent felons? I think something like that. It's like as a general, no, you have to apply for no blanket exceptions. As for the knock itself, if you have to have a knock, as you should if it's a standard need with knock. Don't forget there's an announcement there, right? And that time frame. You need to have a reasonable delay after knocking and announcing yourself before you force entry. This one's just direct forced entry. This one you have to wait a little. How long isn't always clear. More than 2 to 3 seconds. There's cases where it's at knock, police, 1, 2, 3. Boom, you're in. You know, that kind of thing. It's like that's not a knock. You have to give it enough time. 7, 8 seconds. That might be enough. At the same time. Have an announcement. Beware about the use of deception here. Because if you're deceiving here, that's not an announcement. But let's say we just were not, you just, for whatever reason, chose not to do any of it. What happens? Actually, no, it makes no difference whatsoever. That one they didn't put any teeth into. So that's one we can still see that I guess it's a crime control. I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't really matter whether or not we knock. It does. You'll get in trouble if you don't. That kind of a thing. Usually it's more dangerous. But we have the probable cause to go in the first place. If we get the evidence that we need, we get to use it. And so that's the way they work that one. So it's kind of interesting. It's like, yeah. So we have it, but it doesn't really matter if they choose not to. Okay. So we're talking about homes here. The only exceptions to that, consent and emergency. Again, we talked about consent before. It's like be aware who can consent and what it means. And exigence, we've already talked about at length. Any type of a major emergency can be an exigent circumstance. Okay. Next part's about vehicles, and we'll finish with this part today. So vehicles are really, really, really interesting things because one, they allow us to move real fast. That's a lot of fun. But a lot of times when you pull people over, it's not just them in the car, right? There's multiple people involved. There's stuff going on, and having to sort all that stuff out kind of fun. So from the outset, probably what you need to know is the seizing aspect. Okay, whenever car gets pulled over, who is seized in that car? Everyone is seized. No one's free to leave. A passenger kicked open the back door and started taking off for a walk, and they've got probable cause. They're getting tackled. That kind of thing. Like that's what's going to happen next. Yeah, this one's really, really interesting because as soon as the car is seized, so are all passengers. Remember, when we talk about seizures, we'll talk about that movement, and your movement's bound to that vehicle. While you're there, it's like book mentions orders. There are different kinds of orders you can ask of people. First one would be license and registration, standard documentation for use of the roadway. That's why you get to ask for that. Otherwise, if they were on the roadway, you don't necessarily get to ask for that. Some states have that identified statute though. So it's one of the changes. It says here, you can ask questions of anyone in the vehicle, ask for consent to search, lawfully view everything as plain view, as long as you got that stop correctly done. Here's what it says here. You can order people out of the vehicle. Let's see what else are there in terms of orders. I won't say there's more than what's just listed there. Order people out of the vehicles. You can't. That's going to be related to search. That's what it is. We'll talk about in a second. Okay. Vehicle search for weapons on reasonable suspicion. Vehicle search incident to lawful arrest. And then it talks about the warrant requirement. We've already talked about that. So the vehicle searches for weapons. Basically what it's getting at there is that you have that same equivalent for a frisk as you do a person. Right? The case for that one, I can't remember the name, but basically what happened was officer received a tip that person had a firearm they shouldn't have had tucked in the inside of their door. Getting a little what you call it, throw paint kind of thing. Officer saw a person pulled over, walks over to him, walked right over to one and says, and there it is. Yeah, thank you for that. Get out of here. Right? Not supposed to have a gun. That kind of a thing. And so that's because of the danger associated with full protection is viewed as a frisk. When you get beyond that, you start getting into full searches. Those, of course, you have consent. When you have probable cause, realize what it relates to. So you have probable cause of search inside the vehicle. You typically have probable cause of search inside the glove compartment, the console, maybe the trunk, depending on is it locked, is it accessible, is it a place that reasonably hold what it is that they're looking for. And so that's where those types of things come in. So what was that? There's something I was going to say that was a little bit different. First incident to a lawful arrest. Yeah. And so you arrest someone and they are attached to that vehicle inside that incident. What I mean by that is that in that encounter, that suspect had access to that vehicle and it is some way associated with how you were encountering that person. Could be a traffic stop. The case that dealt with that one specifically was person pulled into their driveway while police were there, got out of the vehicle, and after he got out of the vehicle, police recognized, hey, that person got knocked the warrant out for their arrest. They arrested him and then went and searched the vehicle. Like, well, when you notice that they had who they were and that they had a warrant, they were nowhere near the vehicle. Like that vehicle's like on the other side of the room. It's got nothing to do with that. You just want to find some other reason to bring additional charges. And there might be a valid reason to do that, but you have no reason to get into it right now. The fact that they have a warrant does not mean that they are a criminal or engaging in criminal activities right now. And so that's kind of where that line is from there. Let's see, automobile. Ooh. Yeah, so I talked about that warrant requirement for vehicles. Doesn't apply to RVs or mobile homes so long as they're not mobile. If they're still mobile, then they can be treated like vehicles. This case dealt with that one had to do with what was it? Pedophilia and that kind of stuff. So it's like, yeah, no one is treated this which way, and sometimes it's like that privacy thing, you can see where its value is limited. Yeah, big issues to take care of. All right. Look through this real quick. United States first RV zoos where they found totality of circumstances for stopping vehicle. Yeah, some states require you to identify yourself. How did I call? Cell phone. Once the person is. Okay, so they start talking about protective sweeps. I'm going to talk about those for a little bit then. And then we'll pick up with cell phone stuff next time. That kind of stuff. Protective sweeps. Not quite the same thing as a search, because in those instances, what you're dealing with is usually something exigent in nature. And you're just there to dispel that suspicion, that potential that that person, that danger is there. So whenever you get into that, a protective sweep is not a search. It's much more limited in its extent. You look at the whatever it would take to reasonably to dispel those suspicions. That's be reasonable actions there too, though. Let's see here. Looks to be most of it. Not going to announce. Ooh, that's a newer one. When it comes to the consent thing. So what's interesting with this, that the when people can consent. One of the things we talked about a couple of points this semester, I'll make this point real quick and let you guys go. There are situations when you can and cannot consent, and the dynamics of the relationship between the two people themselves are one, right? If you have someone with a great deal of authority over the other, the person who is subordinate to the other cannot consent to the person who is in charge of them, right? Because of the nature of those relationships. That would be like, what would be a good example of that? That's President of the United States, hourly worker, right? The nature of those relationships, particularly the hourly worker works in that same business, kind of things like the divergence there is there's that person here is not going to be able to even free speak, right? Now you got a situation where this person is no longer free to leave. You're going to ask them to consent to stuff. You're holding them hostage here and asking for consent. Do you have to tell them that they're free to leave before that consent is valid? If you're done with your business, do you have to tell them that they're free to leave? In a case where a guy, officer, had a guy pulled over, standard business, done with the traffic stop, or he gives over the ticket, tells for free to leave. Hey, mind if I search your vehicle? And in the course of that search, hey, I found something that was illegal. That question came up, right? Technically, am I here consensually or am I being stopped? You have to look at the totality of the circumstances, just like with probable cause. Would the average person have come to the conclusion that they had the ability to say no? Concluded that person did. So at this point in time, right now, you don't have to be notified whether or not you're free to leave or consent. They don't have to do that way. It's sort of like how they don't have to acknowledge that you can say no to search, but they do have to advise you of your Miranda rights. So, and that is where we'll leave it today. We just finished that chapter. Yay. We'll run through the PowerPoint real quick next time, make sure there isn't anything I missed out on. But that should be most everything that will cover in it. You all have a great day, and I will catch you next week. That's nice to see you. Take care. Bye. I'm always going to stop my videos with that from now on. Bye.